I lived in NYC all of my life, and I have countless stories that I can tell you about this city, but this one takes the cake for sure. I live in one of the safest and most affluent neighborhoods in all of Brooklyn, near the Verraziano Bridge. My friends and I, being high school students at the time, would use fake IDs to get into this college bar in Manhattan on most weekends. There is one train line that serves my neighborhood, and even then, it's a decent walk to get to the nearest station. On this night, my friends and I left our neighborhood and boarded the train. Everything was totally fine on the way to the bar. It's one straight shot ride there, and we had a pretty decent time. I left the bar at 3 in the morning, and my friends decided that they would all stay at one of my friend's grandparents' houses in the neighborhood next to mine, as to not get caught by their parents, which was served by a different train line. We boarded the train, headed towards my neighborhood, but my friends disembarked about 7 or 8 stations before I needed to get off, so that they could transfer to the other train line. As I said before, my neighborhood is very affluent and most people do not use a subway and opt for cars instead. It's a semi-suburban, imagine a mix of New Jersey and a scene out of Saturday Night Fever. Therefore, I was the only person in my car. 2 stops after my friends left the train, a man wearing a stuffed black backpack entered the car and sat down in one of the corner seats next to the advertisement plaster on the wall. I paid little attention to him, but anyone boarding the train at 3 a.m. in my area would be kind of unnerving, especially because of his shabby appearance. Not homeless, but definitely not showered for a few days. My eyes stayed glued to my phone for about 5 minutes, until my attention was ripped away from AFK Arena due to the man removing a large permanent marker from his book bag. He began writing on the advertisement and smiling at me every so often, as he wanted me to acknowledge whatever he was scribbling down. The man began by drawing a hanged man with several religious crosses surrounding him, and then began to write phrases on the advertisement. The end is near. You will pay for your sins. The awakening is upon us, etc., etc. Normal things for a super religious person to say or write, even if it was unnerving that this was happening at 3 a.m. in an empty train car. I tried to shrug the situation off because I did not want to freak myself out, as I tend to overthink things like this. However, the next time I looked up at the advertisement, he had written, "Make sure you check behind you on your way home," and it gave me the unnerving smile once more. At this point, I freaked the fuck out. I was still semi-drunk and my anxiety disorder was not helping anything to the situation at hand. I got up and I moved to the opposite end of the car. My station was next, so I thought that I was just dealing with some loony and that I'd be fine. As I exited the train, the man exited as well. Now here's where I really felt like I was in danger. He was following me with a blank face, no smile, no making sure that I was paying attention to his actions, just blank. I began briskly walking through my silent neighborhood. No one was out. It was 3 a.m. for fuck's sake. The man trailed behind me with his backpack my entire way home and made sure to double lock my doors once I got inside. I didn't tell my mom because I knew she would have had 10 times the panic attack that I did on that train. When I entered my room, I peered out the window. There the man was, staring blankly at my front door. He stood there for about 5 minutes before leaving, trailing off into the darkness. I have no idea what the man wanted from me, or why he followed me off the train. Till this day, I still make myself believe that he simply was deranged or had some sort of mental illness, not that he had any sinister intentions. Weird stalker Bible freak on the subway. Let's not meet again. Hey everybody, sorry for the English, I tried my best. Or rather 2 that happened to me and one of my colleagues. It's not something scary, but rather something very uncomfortable, and my friends told me it would fit in here. Let's get started. Both stories happened in the summer of 2018, when I was working as a facilitator in a recreation center for children, small sections up to first grade. We were in a kind of park about 20 minutes away by bus, where we stayed all day before going back to school at about 5 p.m. so the parents could pick up their children. The park was reserved for us and therefore nobody else than us. Our managers and those who take care of the canteen are supposed to be there, especially since around it there are only fields, a forest, and a building site, but it was quite far. Now that the context has been set, I begin the first story that happened to my colleague. We had walkie-talkies for the day, which allowed us to reach our managers, secretary, or the infirmary in case of a problem. But they were returned when it was time to leave to be recharged during the night. So it was up to the secretary, my colleagues, who was the last one to leave around 7 p.m., to put them on charge and then close the shutters and doors and go home. One morning, I think it was the 8th day, I had been working for a month with the children. We all find ourselves summoned one by one to the office of our leaders. So I go there without really understanding what was going on. I pass in front of the secretary, who doesn't look serene at all, and that worries me a bit. My senior manager asked me if I returned my walkie-talkie the day before, or if I knew if someone had taken one. I say that I did return mine by pointing it at the charger station, explain that I didn't hear anything else. Still ask why I'm being asked this question, and then my manager tells me. The night before at 7 p.m., as she was about to leave, my colleague was closing the shutters. One of the walkie-talkies lit up and a male voice came out saying, "Hey, beauty, you're so beautiful when you close those shutters." I had a vile shiver go down my spine. My colleague, being the only foreigner on the team, the person who spoke to her had to be looking at her and really talking to her and not a hoax. At that time, she had called her roommate who had come to pick her up and left every other day with someone who never heard from that guy again. Nevertheless, we patrolled for several days to try to notice someone for our safety, but especially for the children's safety. The second story takes place in the third week of work. It is around 11 a.m. when I am called on the talkie by my manager. She tells me that something's very strange just had happened. I asked her what it is, and again I could feel the shiver of anguish. A man had come to the secretary and asked to see me. To see me? Using my first and last name. My manager had gone to see me because she thought it was strange, because nobody is supposed to show up at the workplace, and apart of my parents and friends, nobody knew I was there. This man had then introduced himself as my uncle, and that he had come to pick me up for personal reasons. My manager said that I was not on site. That was not true, and that she would let me know that he had came by. According to her, he looked very annoyed and left without giving his name. You could say it was a plausible story, but I only have one uncle who is my godfather, who doesn't fit the description of the man who came, and to whom I don't talk at all. Again, I have never heard from this man again, and have never seen him, but I still have this bad feeling that someone I don't know forged an identity to come and get me. Who knows what would have happened if I had gone. I am grateful to my manager who knew how to smell the trouble. That was a bit long, maybe not very interesting, but it makes me feel good to talk about it. Take care of yourselves. Bye, everybody. Hi there, for the record, I'm a female. I'm turning 19 this year, and the story happened when I was 15. Oh, and also, I'm from France, which can explain my English mistakes if there are any. When I was 15 years old and just got into junior high, I created my first Twitter account that I deleted because of this story. Some information. I didn't tell anyone my username, neither my family nor my friends, because I didn't have any. My profile picture was an avatar, so no pictures of me on the account. And as location, I said Paris, where I lived in the suburbs. I didn't have many followers, 20 or maybe 30, and didn't follow that much people, so my TL was not really interesting. One evening in October, someone sent me a quite strange direct message. It was a 200 followers account, and the message was, "Hi, my name is Rob. I just turned 17, and I wanted to know if you lived in blank town because I will soon move in and go to the town high school, and I'm looking for friends," was obviously the town I lived in. I immediately thought there was something wrong because there was nowhere on my profile I said where I actually lived. But after some time thinking, I remembered of a tweet I made weeks ago about buses, and I mentioned the city, so I told myself he just looked up for blank and found my tweet. His age wasn't shocking because I am 2 years ahead of my classmates. I was bored and he was polite. I answered him and told him I did indeed live in blank town and go to the high school there. The discussion was natural, and we talked a lot that night, mainly about high school and about the food at the cafeteria, about the teachers, that kind of thing. But as it was getting very late, he tried to impose some personal questions like, "Do you live far away from the school? In a house or in an apartment? Do you live with both parents? There's 5 of you? You're not often home alone, right?" I never answered because it was way too shady for me, and unfortunately, he didn't insist. Unfortunately, because if he did, I would have probably blocked him, and he was still asking personal questions to know me better. So I asked him some too. He always answered with what seemed like honesty. I still didn't answer the questions about my house though, because he didn't need to know anything. It lasted 2 or 3 weeks, but it was enough for me to develop feelings for him. He was handsome, super kind, and it was everything I needed. Because I was bullied for years, and even today I still develop strong feelings, but most importantly blind trust in people who are friendly to me. In France in October, we have had 2 weeks long vacation, and the day before we went back to school, he finally told me he was coming to my high school because he finally moved in with his mom, and he asked me a place to meet during the morning break. I was so happy and relieved to be able to finally meet him and told him to join me in the hall. But when he understood that there would be people around, he said he would prefer an isolated place because he was afraid he would not recognize me and didn't want to spend the break looking for me. It was a good excuse for me, so I told him to meet me in the 3rd floor bathroom because we weren't allowed to stay there during the breaks and no one would disturb us. In my head, even though it was a little bit creepy, I still was in school, so nothing could happen to me. The next day, back to school day, I made myself pretty, I wore my best clothes, I counted down the minutes, and finally, when break time arrived, I ran to the bathroom and waited. When he arrived, it was him. He was not a catfish. He looked quite like his profile picture, but I still noticed that he seemed a little bit older than he told me. I thought 20 years old instead of 17. We talked a lot. We got along well. I was so pleased. And at the end of the break, he asked me to go to the fast food with him for lunch. I said no because I didn't have any money, and I always refuse people to pay for me. It's a principle. He seemed disappointed, but offered to walk me home after classes. I explained I have to take the bus, but he could walk me to the bus stop. He looked disappointed again, but finally accepted. And that's exactly what happened. It was so great that it quickly became some kind of routine. We met in the third floor bathroom during the morning break. He walked me to the bus stop after my classes. Surprisingly fact, I never saw him in the hallways nor at the cafeteria. But I thought at the time that the building was huge and that there was over 1,500 students in here. So if our schedules didn't coincide, there was no way we would meet each other. This little game lasted until December, so almost a month and a half. The 14th of December, a Thursday, I complained about how lonely I was going to be that evening. My dad was abroad for work and my brother was always at his friend's house. My little sis was on a school trip and my mom had to work late that very night. It was very reckless of me, but after weeks I thought I could trust him. That evening he walked me to the bus stop. We both waited. I got in the bus, waved at him, and put my earphones. I had 2 stops before my house. It was about 5:45 in December, so it was already really dark outside. And as I got out of the bus, I had a really bad feeling. There was the very uncomfortable sensation on my stomach. I felt like I was being observed. I pressed pause on my music but kept my earphones on so that people thought I couldn't hear anything. And that probably was what saved my life. I lived in a suburban neighborhood, very silent, especially at night, and no visibility on the big road, and the bus passed in. When I heard footsteps behind me, I understood I was right. There was someone following me. He was not well-intentioned. At least I could hear that he was not accelerating, so he was not trying to catch up with me. But I couldn't guess how long it would last. As quietly as possible, I tried to reach for my keys in my pocket. When I finally pulled them out, I ran as fast as I could. The best sprint of my life. I don't know how it worked, but I managed to open and close the door before he could reach me. I then deactivated my alarm, which by the way confirmed that I was home alone, and took a look around through the glass panel on the door. It is not a peephole. It is a whole window, so if someone wants to see what's happening inside, they can. It was Rob, a few meters away, looking at me with a really creepy face. He followed me to my home, probably with a car, and he was clearly not here for chit-chat. I still don't know why I didn't call the police. I was totally paralyzed. We both stared at each other for a minute, and then I took back control over my body. I ran in the kitchen to get a knife and got back to the door. He was there, too, banging against the door. I feared for a second that the glass would break, but it didn't happen. That moment when I was pushing against the door, praying for it not to break, while he was kicking harder and harder, was the longest I have ever experienced. After maybe 5 minutes, he stopped and got around the house, knocking against every shutter, and got back to the door. He looked very angry, but then my neighbor's car reached my house, and Rob ran away, probably thinking it was my mom coming home. On Twitter, Rob sent me 1,000 messages before I could block him. He then deleted his account, and I thought I was done with the story, but quickly after, some accounts, which have just been created, followed me. Thereat were all a series of numbers and the first letter of his name, and as soon as I blocked one, another one followed me. I chose to delete my account because I couldn't make it stop, and it was too hard to endure, because they were sending me dozens of insulting DMs. Later I talked to the people who were supposed to be Rob's classmates, because I haven't met him again in days, but not a single one have ever heard about Rob. This guy was never a student in my high school. That is why I never met him apart from our daily meetings, and that is probably why he seemed so old. I never heard about him anywhere, and I'm still asking myself, what did he want, and what could have happened that night? So Rob, let's never meet again.